Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And we have yet another instance where a museum is returning a stolen item from its collection. This time, it's right here in our own backyard where the Art Institute of Chicago returns an ancient sculpture after discovering and learning that it had been stolen. And the statue in question is a 12th century Nepali sculpture that has been on display, and it is called Buddha Sheltered by the Serpent King Muchalinda, and had been on display in the museum since 1997.
Yep. Yep. Which is, you know, that's a decent amount of time for a museum to have it. It's also a scarily modern date for a trafficked artwork to be showing up. Like trafficked art has happened constantly throughout history. It has not abated. But a lot of these things we see with these repatriation stories are either something that got caught at auction today or something that got shuffled into a collection 100 years ago. So this is kind of in this like middle ground we don't see too much of, where the stuff that got smuggled in the 90s we never hear about.
See, I just think I don't think smuggling or the artifact. I disagree. I think it's occurred throughout that 100-year time. It's just 100 years ago it was a lot more blatant, and over the past like 30 years they've tried to be a little more sly about it, and they've tried to be a little more secretive. We don't
Yeah.
quite know the provenance of this specific statue just yet. We know that it was stolen from the Gutta Bahi in Kathmandu Valley, but we don't know if it was smuggled through an art dealer or through other fencing of historical artifacts. But what we do know is that the Art Institute had managed to discover where it had originated from and has been working with the Nepali government to try and repatriate, which quite honestly we've talked about ad nauseum on this show and on our podcast. But the returning of artifacts to their homeland, especially after discovering that they were stolen, tends to be a positive in my mind.
It's a very big positive, and this one definitely comes under almost an expedited review because it's not only a stolen piece of history and culture, it's also a religious object. And bringing God into the fray is a surefire way to, I don't know, anger people enough to start a war. Not like history's done that 1,000 times, but yeah, this statue, it is a sacred object, and it depicts a holy event from the life of the Buddha, where during a great and terrible storm, the Buddha is out meditating, and in order to protect his friend the Buddha, the Serpent King Muchalinda rises up from the earth or the sea and shelters him, forming a cave with his own body against the storm, so that the Buddha is not disturbed in his meditations.
And this is something that a lot of museums and other institutes have really been making a push for, where they're truly trying to restore a lot of these items to their native lands and to their homelands. And this means not only North American Native Americans, however, it does stretch to other parts of the world. And this is one instance where it does stretch to a different part of the world. And after they made this connection and this discovery with its provenance, they reached out to the Embassy of Nepal in DC, and they had basically agreed that it had been stolen, and they were working on a repatriation claim and deciding how it should best be returned. And the executive director of provenance research at the Art Institute of Chicago, Jacques Schumacher, says that they're grateful to work in partnership with colleagues from Nepal to return it to its place of origin. And I think this could be a very beneficial thing where you either end up doing some level of artifact exchange, you create a partnership where you send things back and forth, or you're able to really make a connection with a country that has historically been repressed by a ton of different regions. I mean,
A
Nepal
lot.
is smack dab between like three great powers throughout history.
Yeah, and Nepal has spent a lot of time just relying on the fact that it is mountains and no one wants to really go in there and bother fighting them. But yeah, the repatriation doesn't have a timeline yet, and part of that is figuring out what sort of repatriation process this is going to go through, like just like you said, just an exchange or just straight up give it back or partnerships. And part of it too is we don't have the full provenance yet. We want to know, we don't want to just know where this came from and give it back there. We want to know how it got from where it's supposed to be to where it is now so that we can track down other things that might have followed the same route and close that route off to any future attempts at smuggling.
And it's very interesting because even one of the interns at the Embassy of Nepal, Mr. Sharad Raj Aran, talks about how they deeply appreciate the collaboration that has been in place that made this repatriation possible, and they even mention that they want to have future collaboration and dialogue, especially in the areas of cultural preservation, research, and exchange. So you're seeing that even a lot of these nations that are receiving their items back want to collaborate. They want to help out. They just want to be included in the story. And I think that is one of the biggest things that tends to get missed out when you look at repatriation, especially as a historically repressed society. I mean, to be included in the research questions, to be included in the honoration and adoration of their past, of their history, of their religion, it's very important to have those indigenous perspectives.
Yeah, yeah. 20 years ago, that didn't really happen. 30 years ago, most places wouldn't even have considered it. And so the fact that this is happening shows that there is that chance for that right step forward and the way to do this the correct way.
And this came after the previous Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, made a strong push to try and actually fulfill a lot of repatriation requests and to truly understand the provenance of every artifact in the collections. And a lot of these institutions and museums tend to just acquire things as time goes on. Whether it was before provenance was really attributed or paid attention to, or just orphan collections or donations. A lot of times things just end up in the collections that the museum doesn't quite fully know how. They just have it and they have it documented. They know they own it. They just don't know how it got from point A to C.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of these things happen with and the deceased leaves his collection of random Native American artifacts to the local museum with absolutely nothing written anywhere on where he found it, why he has it, or what the hell he thinks he's holding.
But he just knew it was cool and wanted to see it saved.
Yep. So many things end up in museums like that.
Especially in just paper boxes of all things. But
you got the shoe boxes.
Yes. Or I think of the banker's boxes more than anything. But this is just yet another example in this continuously evolving saga where repatriation is really becoming a key factor in museums and museum studies and museology as a whole. Because this is yet another challenge that is presenting itself more so than how to display or how to properly store the items, but also how to make sure they're ethically sourced and that they are supposed to be where they are and not missing or stolen or robbed or any number of the negative attributes you could equate to a historic item. But yeah, I actually think that's probably a great point for us to wrap up today's video. Let us know your thoughts down below, especially on the topic of repatriation, because everyone's got their own opinions, and we will see you guys in the next video.